Close the eventide, the darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. When other helper fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim as glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. Oh, thou who changes not, abide with me. I fear no foe, with thee at hand to blaze. Ills have no right, tears no bitterness. Where is death's sting? Where, grave, thy victory? I triumph still if thou abide with me. Hold out thy cross before my closing eye. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning rays and earth's faint shadows flee. In life, in death, oh Lord, abide with me. Abide with me. Abide with me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary McGinnity, and I'd like to welcome you today to our book launch party with Christine Eberle, hosted here by IVC. For those of you who may not know what IVC is, let me take a second and tell you a little bit about us. IVC is a service corps of men and women who have chosen and felt called in the second half of their life to bring their life's experience, their skills and talents in service to people in their community, people who have been marginalized, people who are dealing with economic disparities, and they come with that service and that spirit of service. We also provide for them support in that service work through Ignatian spirituality and a spiritual support program, and bring them together in community. IVC is very fortunate that we have had a wonderful relationship with Christine Eberle over these years. Christine has served IVC on our regional council in Philadelphia and our service corps there. She has also provided service in providing retreats to our staff, to our service corps members, and currently now she is the spiritual reflector for our IVC virtual region. So we are so delighted to be able to offer this time with Christine in celebrating her new book called Finding God Abiding. I have now read this book back and forth a couple of times, and I have to tell you, it is a beautiful nugget of vignettes and stories and reflections and questions that I am truly hoping that everyone who's on this webinar today will get it, bring it by your bedside, gift it to others. It is a beautiful tool to help us to grow in a closer relationship with God. So welcome, I welcome Christine. Come on into the room, Christine, and let's get started today.
Hi, Mary.
This is called a launch party, and as a party, I hope those of you who are out there might have a little, I don't know, mid-afternoon libation with you or something, but I did bring my peach juice this afternoon, and you'll see why that's significant a little bit later in our conversation. But we are here to celebrate you and welcome you. I'd first like to celebrate you as the woman that you are and ask you a couple questions about yourself, if you wouldn't mind. First of all, Christine, you know, you have a wonderful background as a campus minister, but your whole life as a woman, adult woman, you have been in mission and in ministry. You have worked in so many venues to bring and walk with people in their understanding of their faith and in finding their pathway to understanding their own calls, their own missions, and their own life and relationship with God. It's a true celebration of your life. And after, what was it, like 27 years as a campus minister, I think, you decided to retire, and then you took a time and decided to become an author. And that's a wonderful transition, but maybe one that was new to you or you didn't expect. So I'd like to start first by asking you about that time of transition for you. What happened for you in that journey of looking at what is God calling me to next? What gifts and talents do I bring in service through writing? Could you talk a little bit about that transition time?
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't call it retirement. I call it repurposement, because technically I wasn't old enough to have retired. But, you know, like you said, 26 years as a campus minister, I loved my job. I was doing what I wanted to do. But, you know, there's parts of every job that are the parts you love and are good at, and then the parts you do because they're part of the job. Standing committee meetings, budget work, sort of the ebb and flow of the things you do every year when you work in college ministry. It's bingo season. And all of those things were great. But people had been asking me, I joke that you're never really too old to be asked what you want to be when you grow up. And the way I had been answering that question for many years was, I want to be a freelance me. Let me come be me for you for a little while, which Mary is exactly what I've been doing with IVC, of course. And we lost a couple people in our family way too young, including my mom, who died at 67, and my dear cousin Susan, who had been practically like my twin sister from another mother, who died at 46 of a brain tumor. And that really took away any illusion I had that I had forever to get around to doing the thing that I said I wanted to do. And so that that really began to move this question more to the front and center. When was I going to make this happen? And took me about 3 years from when I started a file on my computer called Plan 54. I was 51 at the time. And I was able to put the things in place that I needed to put in place and step down from my full-time job in the month that I turned 54. So start a file and name it aspirationally is one of my pieces of advice to people trying to make a transition.
Oh, I love that, to find it aspirationally, to dream, to follow a dream. And you had started to evoke that in yourself 4 years before you actually realized it and started that transition.
Right.
Was it anxiety for you? Was it a risk? Did it bring any of that to you? Was it?
It was anxiety provoking, like when I was 51 or 52, and thinking about it and thinking about how to break the news to my boss, for example, or my coworkers. At the time, the thought of not being part of sort of the greater campus ministry world nationally, which is a well-connected national organization, that made me feel like, oh, practically homeless, to ponder not being part of that group anymore. But, discernment, as you know, is a choice between goods. So of course there was going to be things that I was sad or anxious about leaving behind. But in the end, it just became very clear that the greater good was to pursue this new life. When I was supervising people, I would always say, if you're up against a wall with a project, do the thing that only you can do. If you're about to go run a service project, somebody else can change the toner in the copier. And those are tiny examples, but that really is what finally motivated me. What are the things that only I can do? Someone else can run this department and is running it quite ably, as a matter of fact. Only I could write my next book. Only I can give the retreats that I want to give. And so it really became a decision to focus on those things and to focus on, honestly, on building a life, not just a career or even a ministry. One of the things I get to do now is cantor for weekday funerals. And usually when I say that, people are like, and this is a thing you want to do? But it is, like a little old lady dies and her funeral is in the middle of the week and there's a handful of people there. It's nice if there's real music at that funeral. That is a gift that one can give to people. I like being able to take friends for midweek doctor's appointments. I love being on just a more flexible, creative schedule that lets me, wake up in the morning. I still wake up super early, but I wake up to read and pray and walk and do many of the things that I've always valued, but had to sort of figure out how to cram into the little pieces of my day. To use one more example, I used to say that my life is like a game of Tetris. I don't know if you remember that computer game. Oh, yeah. I said that to my successor once when we were having tea one afternoon, and he said, and now your life is like a choose your own adventure book. I was like, oh yes, it is. Sometimes I say that to myself when I wake up in the morning.
It does open you to a new time, a new frame, and you can make yourself more available to how can God use me in this moment? How can I be of service and purpose in a new way and use my gifts and talents that way? So thank you for sharing that, Christine, because as with IVC, all the men and women in the core they walk through that entire similar journey. And it's always beautiful to me to find how they discover a newness, a new purpose in their life, a new way of using all their gifts that they've honed over their life, similar to you. All of the beautiful things that you've experienced in your life are bursting in your 2 books. They really are. And you couldn't have written those books at 20. You could only write them now. And that's the beauty of, discovering a newness in your life as we're aging, we're going forward. We can have new adventures, new discoveries, and new ways to discover things within ourselves. I'd like to move a little bit deeper into this whole process of writing. So this is your second of two books. Finding God in Ordinary Time was your first book. Finding God Abiding, the second book. And as you have gone through this journey of writing and editing and publishing and the whole world of that, what has been your experience of becoming a writer? What has that been like? And how have you delved into, if you will, being able to be a spiritual writer? I think some people could be, maybe I could write about, I could be a journalist and write a factual story about things, or I could write an essay about things I know, but to talk about God, oh my goodness, that's a big area. Am I qualified? Am I, How did you land into a space there after this? And what has that been like for you? What is the process that you use that brings forward the words that we get to read?
There's a lot in there. So you just cut me off if you want to move on to another question, or ask another question in there. To get to the early part of what you asked, I've always been a writer. When I was about, 6, I submitted a play of the week to the TV show Zoom on PBS. It was about a carrot who died when someone picked him. So I've been dealing with it, and been writing for a long time, right? But it was terrible. It was terrible. It was terrible. It was terribly spelled. But since I was really little, that is what I wanted to do. I've always written. I always sort of envisioned as a young person that I would be a novelist. And novelists have my utmost respect. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they make up stuff from nothing. Every once in a while, I think if I were going to write a novel, what would it be about? And I think I've gotten an idea, and I realize it's because it's either a thing that happened or a book I already read. So, but of course, in a lifetime of ministry, I've been talking about God, for 3 decades now. One of the real preparations, I think, for this particular kind of writing, this sort of short reflection using stories, was working with a priest who had a very collaborative homiletic preparation style. We would each, Father Sam and I, at the Newman Center at Westchester University, we would each read the readings of the day at home in the morning. And then our mass was at 4:20. We would close his office door at 4 o'clock and say, all right, what do you got? And we would bounce ideas around. And that sounds a little nail biting in retrospect. We'd give it a little more time on Sundays, but the ability to sort of think about what's a real story, and what's the scripture of the day, and how can we connect a story and the scripture and a lesson in a succinct little 5-minute. Any one of these chapters could be a daily mass homily. They really could. If there's priests out there, you are welcome to borrow them. And so that's why I have a great comfort with writing on the topic, because it's what I've been talking about forever. But in terms of the process itself, I feel like I lucked out in this book because I already had the structure in place. I had done all the hard work of figuring out, 4 weeks, 4 sections, 7 chapters, scripture, story, lesson, question for personal reflection, 600 words-ish. So that structure was already in place, which made it much easier. But it always starts with the stories. It never starts with the lesson. It never starts with, now, what do I want to teach people? That's never it. And, I think about, for example, Jesus' own use of stories. This is the soup we're raised in, the Jesus who would say, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell victim to robbers. Ooh, then what happened? So these stories, some of them, Mary, are stories I've been telling forever. The fact that our grandmother taught us to eat strawberries by dipping them right in the sugar bowl. The random hallway encounter with the editor of the literary magazine, who turned out to also be a leader on the search retreat. These are, some of them are stories I've been telling over and over and over again. Stories about my life or things that I encountered in ministry. And others are things that I am a big journal keeper, as you learn from one of those chapters. And some of them are things that just struck me so profoundly when they happened that I had to capture them somehow. And again, may or may not have done anything with them for quite some time, but it always begins with the story. Coming up with the lesson, I have found, is tricky. And the longer I do this, ironically, the trickier it gets, because I'm not here to tell anybody what to think. Life is messy. People's lives are messy. No one benefits from my tying a tidy bow on something that is a mess. That just means I'm not really relating or connecting. And so I had to find a way to segue out of each story into, so here's what I learned. Here's how I'm thinking about it now. I acknowledge that could still change, and then in the reflection questions, continue to open that up to try to make a more explicit connection to what the reader's experience might be. Because this is about the reader's experience. I mean, no one should read this book just so that they can get, a glimpse into my interesting life. My life is not that interesting. It's about the reader's life. It's about the reader's relationship with God. I'm not telling people where to find God. I am suggesting some places they might look. Recognizing, in the words of the first principle and foundation, that everything has the potential to call forth a deepening of our life in God. So I'm just sort of like shining a little spotlight in some places and then inviting people to do their own exploring. You don't have to have had my exact experience to be able to glean something from these stories and these questions. Like, just as an example, I've got a great story about my brother's dog diving into the Sheepscot River. You don't have to have a dog or even like dogs to be able to relate to the sort of yearning feelings that can come up in us when we witness an enviable display of unself-conscious joy. Could be a dog making that display. It could be a 12-year-old. Those are relatable feelings. You don't have to have had my crummy job in my 20s to have had a crummy job in your 20s, or to at any age really be aware that you are no longer in the right place and try to figure out what to do about that. So that's where the questions just try to sort of gently open people's own experiences so they can do that reflecting for themselves.
Yeah. Thank you. And I love that. When you first started talking about the writing part, you're talking about, helping with preaching. And as I was listening to her, I said, well, this isn't writing that preaches at us or tells us or anything like that. You have found a wonderful writing style through the use of story, but also through, I love the questions that you posed at the end. For those of you who have not yet read the book, it's broken down into vignette of short stories. And then at the end of each story that Christine uses, there's some questions that she just layers onto your heart so that you can enter into your own story. And what this book does is it really reinforces to us that we each have a direct experience of God. God is in all of our lives at all times. There's no question about that. He is, she is, whatever is with us at all time. And your book helps us to come to that space so beautifully and so evocatively. So I love how you've captured that in your writing style to be able to do that.
Thank you. I start off with that poem by Tagore, and I sort of weave that through the whole book. And Tagore, Hindu poet Tagore, talks about God as the one companion of my endless life. I love that. I love that. And that's what I'm hoping people can sort of catch a glimpse of. And that's what I mean by the use of the word abiding. You know, we don't have to be conscious of God present at all times for God to be abiding with us at all times.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there's a chance to enter into the awareness of that, that we can use these tools to do. So I want to go a little bit deeper into the book. We referenced before that you have broken this down into 4 movements. That's a very Ignatian idea. But can you talk a little bit about what you mean by movements and how you landed on these particular 4 movements when it came to the understanding of helping the reader to experience God abiding?
So, so I have to back up. In my first book, again, yes, the 4 weeks I'm sure is deeply grounded in my Ignatian schooling. Also Advent. Advent is a nice little 4-week thing. So I knew I wanted 4 things. And in the first book, I talked about 4 terrains where we can experience the presence of God hidden in plain sight. I talked about the wonders of the created world, surprising encounters with strangers, disorienting experiences of travel, and poignant moments of life transition. So time comes to write the second book, and I'm like, oh, now I need 4 new things. So what are they going to be? So the way my own process works, again, started with the stories. I just started writing chapters. I rewrote some things that didn't make it into the last book. I looked at some things that had been blog posts since the book came out. I dug back into journals. And when I had gotten about 9 chapters in, I knew it was time to stop and sort of take a look and see if I could spot any common threads. You know, do these sort of clump together in any way? Are there some common themes that I could, you know, sort of align these stories? And the themes, I wrote this down because I realized today when I started looking back into the history of the book that the chapter titles as they are now is not where I started. I originally said, learning to see, making a way, growing in love, and letting it go, which became perceiving, becoming, embracing, and releasing. But those sort of began to feel like the areas around which the stories were kind of constellating, which then enabled me to, as I continued writing, be more mindful of, now, where would this story go? Or I really could use a few more things about X. So that's sort of the organizational principle. And I like the idea of movements because I say at one point in the book, they are neither sequential nor singular. Like, it's not like we get all our perceiving done and then we can move on to becoming, you know. Yeah, I say we awaken to the world around us, perceiving. We discover and rediscover our path. Hello, IVC. Becoming. We practice love in its many forms, embracing. And we grieve the loss of much that we hold dear, releasing. And as you know, we do that over and over again. They don't have to go in order. They're not done just once. And my parish had just spent a great deal of time on a retreat using the theme of tapestry right before I started writing this book. And I knew that there was still richness in there, that I could use a lot of language about how these things weave together. I say that if you picture a loom, that there are givens in our lives that are already in place when we show up in this world. We are born to particular parents in a particular century and geographic location and class and race, and like all those givens are in place. But then there's our experiences and our circumstances, and that those weave the different threads horizontally that makes up that beautiful tapestry that is our life, which we spend too much time like this close to. So you just really can't see. I don't know about you, you know, it's very hard to see it whole. God sees it whole. And I think prayer and reflection is one of the things that helps us to step back just a little bit to try to see more of the picture than whatever's right in front of us.
Mm, mm. I love when you were talking about God sees it whole, because as you were talking, I was picturing a spiral, through all the decades and all the journeys of our life, those themes of, that we are awakening, becoming, and then we release. Those are over and over in so many different ways, but they're holistic and they evolve. But God is seeing all those processes and with love to us. So we may be judgmental, we may see certain parts of those moments and have huge judgments about them, about ourselves. I'm not becoming enough, I'm not being enough, I'm not doing enough, I can't let go enough, all those kinds of things. And yet there's an understanding that there's an organic evolution for our beings and our souls. And it's hopefully by us having the ability to reflect on that, to see where love is actualizing in our lives. So that is really, really beautiful. I thought that it would be really fun, and I hope this would be good with you, is I would love to give our viewers and listeners a little experience in the now of how your beautiful book can help us to reflect. By the way, all of you out there, we have a Q&A section coming up in a minute, questions and answers. So if you have any questions for Christine, please write them into the chat box and we will be having some time to ask her some questions. So please take some time to pepper us with some good questions. So I asked Christine if she would pick out a selection that she felt would be very good for her today. I invited her, just pick one that speaks to you today in this moment, and she has done so. And so what I'd like us to do for just a few minutes as a group is I'm going to ask us to just get in a moment of quiet space within ourselves, some stillness. Christine will read one of her stories, one of her pieces. And just let the words come into your heart, into your silence, into your soul. And we'll stay in some quiet. And she will layer in some of the questions that she has put at the end of that segment. And just let whatever comes into your heart and into your mind, just let it be. And we're going to have a little mini retreat using Christine's writings right here and now. So let's take a minute. Quiet ourselves, take a few deep breaths, relax your body. Let's come to some moments of quiet and peacefulness and listen to these words that come from Christine.
This is chapter 16, and the title is Finding God in a Juicy Peach. And we begin with a verse from 2 Corinthians. See, now is the acceptable time. Now is the day of salvation. It was peach season at the Jersey Shore. The farm stand on the way to Cape May displayed bountiful baskets right out front, a most effective marketing strategy. We bought a half bushel, noting that the peaches were still a bit firm, and thinking we'd have fruit to enjoy for the whole vacation week. They ripened overnight, which is how we found ourselves standing over the kitchen sink, each devouring a juicy, delicious, perfect peach, and eyeing the rest of the basket with alarm. Now what? We could have put them into the refrigerator, or baked a cobbler, or made smoothies, or daiquiris, and they'd have been tasty in all those forms, but they never would be as good as they were right that very minute, dripping warm juice down our chins into the sink. The peach dilemma, admittedly minor, demonstrates the limitations of my lifelong commitment to delayed gratification. As a child, I was always the one hoarding Easter candy on Memorial Day. And even as an adult, I often defer the delightful. Sometimes this approach is grounded in self-control learned at my mother's knee. Homework before Batman, veggies before dessert. Other times, however, it seems rooted in fear, the old scarcity principle, as though somehow there would be no chocolate left in the world when my foil-wrapped bunnies ran out. I enjoyed another peach on the spot, but Carpe Diem was not finished with me. That afternoon, I stood at the edge of the surf and watched my friends Jeff and Deb frolic in the ocean, while I navigated my usual tension between longing to be in the water and dreading the waves. Traditionally, I vacillate in the shallows all week before braving it on the last day of vacation, immediately regretting not having taken the plunge earlier. Suddenly, Jeff raced out of the water, took my hand, and escorted me past the alarming breakers to the sublime rollers beyond, where we floated with ease for almost an hour. It was the longest I had ever been in the water without being able to touch bottom, and it was pure bliss. The ocean had been beckoning all along, like a basket of ripe peaches. The only sensible course was to dive in. This experience was especially poignant because Jeff is battling early onset Alzheimer's. My brilliant and funny friend is still both those things, but the creeping fog is visible. He's in a clinical trial, which may slow the progression, buy him time, but time is not infinite. And the disease is making it clear to postpone enjoying one another's company is to waste the gift. Like yesterday's ocean or an overripe peach, it's not coming back. Of course, this is true for all our loves and friendships. We're always running out of time. We just don't acknowledge it most days because we need to go to work and cut the grass and do the wash and pay the bills. Duty calls. Delight can wait. However, neither work, nor grass, nor wash, nor bills negate the lesson of the peaches. When life hands me something precious, I want to let myself enjoy it in the measure it deserves. And so I invite you to ask yourself, what gratification do you routinely defer? Did something come to your mind immediately when I said that? What gratification do you immediately, routinely defer? Later. That'll be great later. Question, is it in the service of something better? Or simply a squandered opportunity? Of course, we defer things in the service of better things all the time. If you've ever changed a diaper when you wanted to do something else, you know that duty often calls and delight must wait, but not always. When is it in the service of something better? When is it just a squandered opportunity? My final question is this: what might you resolve to enjoy more fully in the moment, delighting in God's gift? I'm willing to bet that for each person watching this today, there is a small delight that could be awaiting you this afternoon or this evening. Not something once in a lifetime, but something precious and real and delightful, can you take an extra beat? Take a couple extra beats to let yourself really soak that in. It could be the face of someone you love. It could be the feel of the sun on your skin. It could be the taste of your peach juice. What can you resolve to enjoy more fully in the moment, delighting in God's gift for you?
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Christine. Part of me wants to shut the computer down and go run out to the farm market right now and get that peach.
It is peach season.
Beautiful images. I do love so much how you bring these images that we can all relate to and moments of time. But this idea of being able to discern between what is in the present moment that is a delight that is being given to me at this time and what is a squandered moment, I think it's a very powerful question for us to discern and to see what is in this moment. I know for me right now, this moment in this conversation is a delight. So I do appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you for that reflection and that piece. And I hope this gives you, the viewers, a little taste of what her writing, what Christine's book can help open within your mind and in your heart. It is one of those wonderful pieces of books that you can sit by your bedside, by your chair, and pick up now and then. I have Ordinary Time there still by my desk, and pick it up, and it is really beautiful in the way that it is structured that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for those few minutes of reflection. Now, what I'd like to do, we do have some questions coming in here in the chat, so we have a few minutes here. So let me open up some of these questions for you. Are you ready? There's sight unseen for you. I know that. Let's see. One question here. How do you feel your writing connects with readers? Is there a particular group that you're trying to reach and connect with?
Oh, that's a good question. It's fun. I know that my typical reader is a church-going woman over 40. And certainly I'm writing for those people. However, it has always been really important to me in both of these books that I say I am trying to certainly feed the faithful, but also to provide spiritual nourishment for people skeptical or weary of religion. I know that with the last book, for some people, it became kind of a go-to gift for their spiritual but not religious grandchild, or their I don't go to church anymore sister-in-law. Because it spoke to the values of the purchaser, and it was going to relate to the experience of the reader, even if that reader wasn't a church-going person. So I'm part of why I'm really trying not to hand people answers is that I know people are coming from so many different places, and I want to create a hospitality, a spaciousness where people who are, steeped in Ignatian spirituality or faithful church-going Catholics, like, they're not going to be like, what is this? They're going to relate to that. But someone described me as an ambassador of the faith or a translator. And so I try to write in such a way that people who are really not sure about this whole thing, but who do appreciate the chance to think deeply about their life and who are open to questions and to wondering, I'm also writing very much for them, and always with an eye to them. I say that if a spiritual lesson doesn't work in the hard case, it probably was not true to start with. And so I always try to have one eye on the hard case. You know, if I'm writing something about grief, I'm trying to have, you know, in my mind's eye, somebody who's been through a devastating loss, and try not to say anything that would make them want to throw my book across the room, as an example. So
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, the term there, the experience writing for people who have had a weariness of religion. I think so many of us can relate to that. It has been, several decades now of scandals, questions, abuse, divisions, all kinds of, just get you so weary. And you can get to a reaction point, a retreat. I don't want to go to that. I don't want to do that. There's just that space there that's out there. And I was at a IVC retreat yesterday down at Loyola in Maryland, and people around the table were talking exactly about that experience. They think about it for their friends and their families, and so many people just cannot feel connected or fed within the structures as they exist today. And there's a grieving and a loss of that, but at the same time, there's a grappling. What are the tools? How can I connect to divine love and grace? And how do I get to that space? And for you to try to write in a way that can capture that bridge for people is a much needed skill and tool today, because there's so much weariness, so much grappling. There's still hope. I see the hope, but it's real. And I'm sure you see this a lot in your own retreat work.
When I was down at my Georgetown launch event last week, someone said to me, "I love your writing. How do we get more of this in the Catholic water?" And I said, well, honestly, I have no idea who's here at this event. More diocesan priests need to make the spiritual exercises. And getting more people to make the exercises is one of the Jesuits' universal apostolic preferences for the next 10 years. So maybe things like this will get out into the Catholic water. The ability, the belief that God is trying to communicate, not just laying down thick tomes of rule books, but really trying to communicate and lead very personally, I think is something that people desperately need to have a sense of. And we don't get that in church a lot, depending on where we go.
Yeah. And, what you were saying about get it into the Catholic water, though, as you were saying that, I'm thinking it's in the water. It's been there for 400 years.
How do we get people to drink the water?
Catholic contemplative writers. It's just, that's one of the things that is so amazing about our church, but we're not always introduced to it. We're not always exposed to that richness of spirituality, spiritual direction, spiritual exercises that, but it's there. And I think for many Catholic, that's one of the things about our church and the beauty of it that keeps us connected. And the idea, I love the term you were being an ambassador. How do you get people into that part of the water that is very enriching, despite the actions or activities or things that kind of give people pause or distance people or alienate them, for sure.
Past the terrifying breakers and into the sublime rollers beyond.
Okay. All right, ready. You did great. That was a great question. You did great. Let me give you another question here, a little bit deeper, okay? But it's a sign of the time. So here you go, sister. We're living in a time of great anxiety. Climate change. Europe is burning today, right? War, economic disparity, fears, divisions politically, religiously. We're speaking of all these, and these just times feel so overwhelming to people. And it is, though, these are times that call us, it's just aching. We're seeking deeper reflection and prayer. Do you have any thoughts around how How do you grapple personally with these times that we're in? And how does your prayer time help or speak, or do you feel that it's helpful to you in these times? What can you
Mhm.
speak on that yourself as um,
Well, it's bonkers right now.
mm,
Yes, I'm not sure it's ever not been bonkers, but it seems particularly crazy pants these days.
mhm.
Um, so one of the things I promise I will circle around to that question. But one of the things that I have been thinking more and more as I've been talking about this book and rereading this book is that it's kind of like an extended Ignatian examen. The book sort of rummages back through my life to try to notice where God has been present. And I have been trying to practice the examen more and more in my life. I will confess to being a little bit embarrassed by why I only recently have truly embraced the examen. It is because I only recently discovered you can do it in the morning.
Well, now, Christine, I'm going to stop you right there for one
Sure.
second, because we're always accused of this. Now,
We're using
let's
Ignatian language.
not assume that the audience here, hundreds
Let's
of
be a
odd people,
translator, an ambassador.
even know what's
Yeah.
you're using our insider baseball lingo here, and
Right.
you threw that out earlier, the first principle. Would you mind explaining to our audience, for those who may not know, what is the examen? Just what
So,
is it?
very, very simple prayer that St. Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Jesuits, designed and encouraged people to do twice a day, actually, though I'm not there yet. It is a brief prayer, 15 minutes max. We begin with gratitude. We ask for the light to see what God would like us to see about whatever period of time we're praying with. And then we rummage backwards lightly over that period of time to see what stands out. It could be a wonderful thing. It could be a time when we miss the mark. But we just sort of notice the highlights of our day with an eye to where might God have been in that? What might God have been giving me or asking me for or inviting me to? How did I celebrate that? Where did I fall short? And then look forward to the time ahead and make a hopeful resolution for what lies ahead. Knowing what I know from this period of prayer, how do I want to be tomorrow? How do I want to be the rest of this day? It is super simple. But what I have found is that when you do it regularly, you start to notice patterns. The very fact that you start with gratitude every time, I think has a tremendously calming, sort of centering effect, talking about all the terrible things that are going on all around us. But if we have to start with gratitude every day, those things that we're grateful for, they are just as real as the awful things that are happening. And even in the awful things that are happening, there are wonderful, kind, remarkable people stepping up to do things. And so even in the awfulness, there are things to be grateful for. So I think that prayer, and especially that sort of prayer where we rummage backwards and try to notice God, it helps us remember, gives us perspective. It helps us be mindful of the bigger picture than just whatever crazy thing is right in front of us. It reminds me, one of my favorite lines on Holy Thursday, in the gospel where Jesus is about to wash people's feet. The intro to that story says, Jesus, fully aware that he had come from God and was going to God, took a towel and got down on his knees and served. And I think it is such an overlooked line. We focus on the action because, wonderful, shocking, emulable action. But we breeze right through that line. Jesus, fully aware that he had come from God and was going to God. Mary, that describes each and every one of us, and we are never fully aware of that. But if we could be reasonably aware that we've come from God and are going to God, I think it would be much easier to just get down on our knees and serve and do what we're being invited to do.
At
In
this
the midst
moment
of
in
whatever
time.
going on.
Yeah.
Right. Because that
And
moment in time was a pretty scary moment for Jesus.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same type of situation in that regard. The world is ending, it's all chaos. But that they examine in its simplicity and its shortness. In a practice, like you said, it's twice, that Ignatius asked his followers to do it twice a day. Just stop, be present, review, be aware. Be aware of where grace is working, where God is present in the moment. So it helps us in this time where the anxieties can go crazy. I mean, people are struggling with all kinds of mental health anxiety issues. It's just overwhelming to us. But if we pull ourselves into the present moment and be aware of gratitude, just that alone, and to have that structure in place. And I agree with you. It's a very simple thing. I bring it into there's a moment in every day where I stop and I go to get a cup of coffee. And that's my little examine walk. It's a little cup of coffee, but it becomes a habit, habit of taking that moment. And it is, it really does help you to be attentive to the day and be attentive to the moment where grace can be moving, no matter how fraught your day is or anxious your day is or whatever. And, it is a wonderful practice to be able to do that. And it's been a gift in my life. I know that. And I know it is for you as well.
One writer I read recently said about the examine, it's like a sieve that we gently shake to see what falls through and what is worth holding on to.
I like that.
Nice image.
What
else you got?
Okay, well, this is a very self-centered question. I have to ask you this.
Okay.
So you work a lot with our IVC Service Corps members, and I think you even have a couple of family members who are a part of IVC. So can you tell me about what your graces have been about working with IVC? What do you see in IVC, and why do you like being a part of us?
Oh my word, I love being a part of IVC. And not just because its members are so much more my age than college students are these days. IVC is for people 50 and better, as we know. But it's not just about the age group. It is, well, first of all, it is delightful to be around people who speak Ignatian. To go back to what you just said about our insider language, but to people who are grounded in the same spirituality as I was brought up in, as an adult. I'm Jesuit educated. I went on retreat at the Jesuit Center at Wernersville for 34 years until it closed. Deeply, that's the water I've been swimming in for a long time. And I've been working in Catholic settings for a long time, but I've always been sort of the voice in the wilderness when it comes to Ignatian spirituality. I've been sort of trying to introduce it, or I've been sort of trying to use it without acknowledging that that's what I'm up to. But to be with other people who have found a home in this particular spirituality is absolutely delightful. And to be with, this virtual community. These are people who are serving all over the country who come together to reflect for 2 hours each month. They're fascinating people doing fascinating things. And I am so inspired by their desire to find new ways to give and to serve and to be generative at any age. In our last meeting of the virtual group for the program year that just ended, someone said at the end of the meeting, wouldn't it be amazing if the most meaningful thing we are going to do with our lives still lies ahead of us? I find that tremendously inspirational. Yeah. Because
Mhm.
I feel like so many people that I know are reluctant to retire because they can't envision what they would do. Like they know what they would be going away from, but there's nothing that they're sort of yearning to go towards. And so
Mhm.
retirement just feels like a loss.
Mhm.
The people in IVC are going towards.
Mhm.
They are using their time energetically and creatively, and they're bringing all this wisdom to
Mhm.
what they're doing. Uh,
Mhm.
they are, they are being well used by God. Uh,
Mhm.
so
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, the men and women in the service corps just knock my socks off all the time. There'd be a retired, medical doctor, or a lawyer, or a social worker, or a mother, a teacher, all these great things that they've done in their experience. And they say, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to work in a nonprofit agencies to help people who are serving the marginalized. And they go, and many of them take these leaps. I know one story of an engineer, a retired engineer, and he was asked, would you go into the inner city and work and teach sixth grade math? And he's like, I know nothing about teaching sixth graders math, much less kids downtown. And he was terrified. He's this extraordinarily successful professional. And he went in there, he took the leap of faith, got in, started figuring out how to do it. The kids loved him because he was present to them. He went on to get a master's degree in secondary education so that he could be better for them. These are the kinds of stories, but they do, these men and women come in and they say, I want to bring what I can into areas of need. I'm here. I'm going to show up. Let's find where I can best fit. They are very dedicated. They serve 1-2 days a week, every week. It's remarkable what they do. They are my heroes. They are my personal heroes. And that's where I find hope in the world, in people who choose to do service. And these agencies where we place people, those agencies and what they're doing in this world are extraordinarily hopeful and wonderful and beautiful.
Well, I'm looking at your slogan there on the screen, experience making a difference.
Right.
And, I think about, as a campus minister, I certainly brought student volunteers to local nonprofits, constantly. But oh my God, it's exhausting for the nonprofits to get like a brandy new volunteer who's going to be there for 3 hours and never come back. Or students who are going to be there for a week and never come back. To have a seasoned volunteer who is committed and who was able to really understand the organization, tackle a significant kind of work, own it, not have to be oriented over and over and over again. That is a breath of fresh air for the agency. And it's also so good for the service corps member to know that they're making that kind of a difference and not just like showing up, making the sandwiches, going home. So
yeah, and some of them do some fantastic things to add to the capacity of the agencies. But then what feeds them is when we bring them together every month for a community meeting, for reflection on what that experience means, and to pray together around it. What is this? How do you find God in all of this? How do you find God in working with the homeless? How do you find God with these facing the challenges of social injustice? How do you find them? And so I have to say, I'm circling back to celebrating you, sister. Your gifts of helping people to reflect in that space deepens their experience, and they become closer to God in that experience, but they bring that grace back into the work, and it's beautiful to see. And they stay. Many of our service corps members stay several years in their dedication and work, and they are incredible people. So thank you for your work and your service to IVC, and bringing your gifts and talents to those men and women as they go out into the community and that lift up others and live out that Ignatian idea of being men and women for others. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to tease off here. We're at the end of the hour. Thank you guys for asking questions. I will give you a little heads up. Somebody asked a question. Hey, Christina, you're working on your 3rd book. Well, I got a little something for you guys. I am looking forward. Christine and I are going to be walking the Ignatian Camino together in October. Christine has been a main leader in us doing this. In Spain, we'll be walking the walk of St. Ignatius. She's doing the whole walk. I get to join just for half of it, but I think, Christine, am I right? Are you going to be doing some reflecting and journaling while you're on the walk? And maybe Thinking of another book?
I had better get a book out of this, Mary. Although, you make your plans and God laughs. But I mean, I have been writing. We have been, I mean, I don't need to tell you, Mary, I'll tell everybody else. We've been working on this thing since the fall of 2019.
I know.
Because this was
The Camino
supposed to
walk?
happen
I know.
in the fall of 2020. And in April of 2020, I was so clueless about how long this thing was going to last that I bought airline tickets
Oh,
for September.
I thought
I
you were
know.
breaking your walking boots or whatever, but yeah,
right.
thank you for Christine for that. And we have a group of IVC directors, some IVC members and friends. Is a group of 17 who are doing the whole walk. It's an IVC pilgrimage. And then 10 of us are joining in at the halfway point and completing it. Father Iraberi, a Jesuit priest, will be leading it. And each night we stop and reflect together and following the spiritual exercises as we do this journey. So I think there'll be a beautiful book that will come out of that one, my friend.
I hope so. I've got sort of a working title. I want to call it Finding God Along the Way. But then the subtitle is going to be something like, I don't know, Lessons for Every Day from the Ignatian Camino or something like that. Because we don't need another guide to the Ignatian Camino. There are several really good ones out there.
Yeah.
Good. But what can I glean from this experience for people who are never going to be able to take a month out of their life or 2 weeks out of their life and go to Spain and walk, from Loyola to Manresa to Montserrat to Barcelona? What can we bring home for them?
Okay, well, we're wrapping up here at the top of the hour. Thank you all for coming. This has been really wonderful. We're going to put up a slide for how you can buy the book. And I see a question just came in here, Christine. How can they want to know how they can get a signed copy of your book. So I'm going to suggest that they are going to get a link, information on how to get to your blog. They can write to you. They are not your blog, to your website. They can write to you there if they'd like to request a signed copy. Am I correct on that?
So when we close this out, don't close your browser right away because a screen will come up that will direct you to my website. It's available wherever books are sold. If you would like a personalized copy, you are welcome to order it through my website, and I will write anything you want in it and send it to you from my very own post office. There's also a great website called Bookshop where you can benefit your own local independent bookstore, which is a wonderful, and all that is wonderful on the website. I also want to say my first book, Finding God in Ordinary Time, is now available as an audio book. That was my winter project this year. So if you enjoyed hearing me read Finding God in a Juicy Peach, if you would like me to read to you every morning for a month, consider on my website, you can find, again, several ways to do that. It would be just wonderful to get that into the earbuds of people out there.
Good. While you're walking and training for the Camino in the morning, the earbuds. So thank you all. I've got my peach juice. I'm going to sip it. Thank you guys again. Thank you, Christine. And congratulations again on your new book. Thank you all. Be well.
Thanks, everybody.